this assumption, because we're assuming that 90% of folks want to live in the urban core.
You know, you talk about these rapid transit corridors. Everything does not need to go downtown.
We need cars. We need vehicles to be able to get across.
A feeling of, it doesn't matter. We've already said our piece. No one's going to listen to us anyway, because if we share an opinion that doesn't fit with the ideology or the policy that's already embraced, then it falls on deaf ears.
Mayor, so I move, it's recommended that Committee of the Whole recommend that Halifax Regional Council 1 accept the draft regional municipal planning strategy included in Attachment A to be used for public engagement purposes.
I just have some quick questions. The intent of the plan to direct 90% of new housing to the urban areas. Just wondering, how much market conditions play into this, this assumption, because we're assuming that 90% of folks want to live in the urban core, A, and can afford to live in the urban core, B. So that's question one.
It seems like I'm on the roller coaster ride once again with regional plan. The only council around this table that's been from the very beginning, from the start of the first regional plan, the RP +5 and everything else since that time. And again, it seems like rural HRM has to wait again. And I'm a little frustrated about that. I hope we put a moratorium on any more regional center plan amendments, because we spent enough time on the regional center. We did all the work we did. Now it's time to put that behind us and get on with the suburban areas and hopefully eventually to the rural areas in a reasonable amount of time. But, those two communities, Portals Lake and Muscat Albert Harbor, are waiting for street infrastructure. They want to see some hard assets of sidewalks and stuff like that. They need to have that presence in their district centers. Sheet Harbor is a great example where it has been done, and it transformed that community. And something that we need to look at that as an example that can be duplicated, not just Eastern Shore, but over in Hubbards as well is another location that could be done. I'm really hoping that we bring back the Rural Express Transit proposal from 2007. If you want to provide transit opportunities and mobility for rural Halifax, bring back that plan. You talk about these rapid transit corridors. One missing link is still the Westfall, Cole Harbour, Burnside Transit Corridor route. Everything does not need to go downtown. We need some cross-town corridor traffic going along there. I keep talking about the need for widening that street, extending the sewer line down there, development of the Kuma lands and the Westfall lands. We have Kel developments there at the corner of Ross Road and Lake Major now, eager to develop. I'm hoping that the Kuma Westfall corridor and the Main Street corridor be a significant part of this project, of this plan, but I don't see references in the document. Private roads, I think the ban on private roads should be lifted. I think it's time now. We need to have opportunities and abilities to put private roads to provide access for areas that may have limited egress. I'll leave my comments for now, Mr. Mayor, but like I said, when we talk about it's summer reading, well, it's pretty light reading when it comes to rural areas in this particular report. There's not much in it. Thank you.
Yeah, 353 pages. It was quite the read. One of the things that we have talked about a bunch over the past while was community consultation. And I was pleased to see that there is a good block of time for that. We are going to be able to get the information out in our newsletters about this. I do need a lot of lead time for this. Because I would love to have those town halls, those community meetings in Lower Sackville. They are going to be absolutely critical to the success of this. We have a good working community, and I want to make sure that when I come to this table, I am representing my community and their thoughts and their words and their opinions about what their community should look like. So having them at the table is going to be absolutely critical to that. Policy H9. This one's an interesting one. To provide more housing choices across the municipality shall amend existing low-density residential zones to allow any form of low-density housing to a minimum of 3 units per lot, etc. This effectively gets rid of R1 and R2, if I'm reading that properly. And I think there has to be a lot of discussion about that. My area has been built predominantly on R1. And for that to go from R1 to R3 with this. We need to draw a lot of attention to that. H12. To support development of additional housing and efficient use of land, the municipality shall consider reducing or removing parking minimums for residential developments, especially where transit exists or is planned. There's a lot to that one. What has to be considered is where people live in the grand scheme of things, where we are, and I've mentioned this over and over and over, living outside the 102, we need cars. We need vehicles to be able to get across, or we need transit. We probably need both. To eliminate parking and not have an effective, efficient, reliable transit system where people can use it to get where they want to go, when they want to go, when they know they're going to get to where they're going to go, have the cross-community connections, that's going to be critical. So we need a strong transit system before we remove the parking. It's just not going to work any other way.
Certainly. Thank you for your comments, Councillor. And absolutely, we wanted to have a longer engagement run, so we make sure we have lots of time to speak about the policies. There are a lot of them. As you've noted, you've pulled out a few. So just to speak on the housing choices, you know, we've been speaking about providing more opportunities for different forms of housing. Gentle density is a way to both enable more units and also increase affordability for residents. So it's something that has been identified nationally as a way that we can move the needle on housing supply. So that is why we are testing whether or not we can have that provision and shift the provisions in our bylaws. We already have effectively the ability to have 2 units with the secondary suites and backyard suites provisions. So this is just adding a bit more flexibility for people who have the room to do so. For parking, it's not eliminating, eliminating parking requirements simply means we're not going to regulate parking requirements requiring a minimum. It doesn't mean that people can't have parking. So I want to make sure that, you know, it's what are we regulating? What are the most important things to regulate? And certainly as a person who grew up in the suburbs here, I know very well what it's like to live in the suburbs. And we're not saying that everyone needs to leave their car behind or isn't going to use their car. Part of how we're trying to design communities to enable better, stronger, shorter trips within communities, make sure there are lots of services right in communities. So when people are doing their daily business, those trips are close to their home. As well, we do need that transit system to be in place for those longer regional trips. So we're doing lots of work on that, and parking is just one piece of a much bigger system. So we agree with you on that.
This is the paper version of what we're talking about, having to digest and bring forward the relevant pieces into our communities, and that's the really critical part. I've got a few points that I want to raise. One is, again, I want to just identify that the Cow Bay area sometimes is looked at as rural, sometimes is looked at as a suburban. Just need to be clear about where does it fit in this kind of consultation and community planning. Because and then there's also, for instance, so there's Eastern Passage, Cow Bay within District 3. Of course, there's the Dartmouth South, which has a suburban context for sure. And then there's the South Woodside area, which is smack dab in the middle of a full-on industrial environment. And so when we talk about community planning and going out to these communities, please look at all of those individually, because each of them have the uniqueness of something that I think may not necessarily be found in some of the other districts. That's why I say all the time, what is Cow Bay considered? So a lot of infrastructure lost, a lot of lives affected, and that's going to be on people's minds. District 3 has also had fires in the Cow Bay area, and we have a lot of rural areas that have the similar scenarios of Councillor Lovelace, District 13, where egress was not considered with the potential of that kind of fire. And we're still building out. We're still going forward. So I would anticipate this is going to be on people's minds. For sure, it will be within the Cow Bay area. I suspect it in many of the my colleagues' communities. And so as we go through this, and I'm grateful, we have a longer period. Frankly, I don't know how long it's going to take. And I know that the center plan probably took many years and it didn't necessarily get finished quickly. And I want people to be aware that this is that beginning stage. If we don't have time to really get to the heart of what we know is the right, or what we believe at a moment in time is the right, because moments change, scenarios change, communities change, situations change. At a point where we think we've got it as close to right as we could possibly get it, that can take a long time. It may take longer than October. And I would encourage us to be open to that. That's the benefit that we have and the obligation that we have when we're looking at some significant change. We have master plans and land use bylaws, as is noted in here, that are historically 30, 40 years old and outdated and have been band-aid with amendment after amendment and change and rezones and look at it. But we as councillors who are now in the cusp of this, we're counting on you and work with us. We have more of a pulse, I've said it before, around communications, the pulse of the people who are out there who will come out to those meetings, who will take the time to share with their networks and get the people out that are residents that need to be at the meetings, that will provide you the kind of insight into the communities that you need. So please take advantage of it. Yes, we all need lead time. And if Ellen, our councillor's communication person, is listening, I encourage her to work with you as often and as quickly as possible, particularly during these first few months, because as we roll this out, I don't know how much time I'm out of time, as we roll this out, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that indulgence, as we roll this out, they will, if they have a good experience, they're going to want to be part of it the next time you are in the neighborhood. So thanks for that. Okay.
I'm not sure where this fits in this discussion, but just the integrated mobility plan as it is attached to the land use in our municipality, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around, like really what exactly that means for all the different specific decisions that are made. But in particular, the IMP is a document that covers the whole municipality, and there doesn't seem to be any consideration for the different demographics of the different areas. And I'm just wondering, in this draft plan, could that be something that's looked at when you are like pulling out the specifics of a suburban plan or the specifics of a rural plan, so that the policies are not just a one-size-fits-all for these very different areas than the downtown core and the urban areas? And the needs are incredibly different. And I just feel like, speaking on behalf of, I know a lot of my residents who've reached out to me for some of the changes we've had in District 4. I think there's almost a feeling of, it doesn't matter, we've already said our piece, no one's going to listen to us anyway, because if we share an opinion that doesn't fit with the ideology or the policy that's already embraced, then it falls on deaf ears and it won't actually implement any change or any ability to even tweak, some of our planning policies in the future. So is that something that is something up for discussion and debate in this communication opportunity for residents?
And all of St. Margaret's Bay, who have been asking for transportation options. When we build as of right, and we create communities that are disconnected and far away from transportation outlets, we cause a lot more problems and unintended harm to communities by adding to the congestion intentionally. that's a really serious problem. Come down to Upper Hammonds Plains and see all of the multi-unit development that has taken place there without any realistic goal of providing transportation to that community. So we've got these serious challenges compounded by kind of the lack of connectivity, compounded by the lack of resources, quite frankly, and infrastructure that's needed to support these communities that are not subdivision related. So that subdivision bylaw is irrespective of the actual problem that we have here. So I think it's important for us to think about what are we going to do with as of right when we don't get any funding, we don't have any parks, and I just to underline and underscore the issue. So Glen Haven, no parks, lots of subdivision activity going on there. St. Margaret's Village, absolutely no parks, all private streets. Perry Pond, they've been there for 7 years, no parks. No parks. So Upper Hammonds Plains, no parks. Voyager Lakes, they've got a tiny little park for this huge subdivision. So what are we doing here? On one hand, we're saying, yes, we absolutely want to create great communities to live in, but we don't have, clearly, we don't have the carrot and we don't have the stick. So we're missing out on that. I do want to focus on, 30 seconds left. Okay, agriculture, urban agriculture. We call it urban, we talk about market gardens, but we don't acknowledge the fencing bylaw. So anybody who's in the rural area knows that if you're going to have a big garden, you're going to have a big fence to keep the deer out. So it seems to be a little bit of an oversight there, and also just looking at the reality of agriculture in a rural or suburban. I guess it depends on by whose definition of which business unit we're talking about when we talk about suburban boundary. Everybody seems to have a different boundary. But we need to focus on all of the aspects. If we're going to support urban agriculture, we also need to think about, well, what does that garden actually need? And do they need to come to the Northwest Community Council to request a fence? Because that's the way it's set up now. So I think we need to rethink how we're encouraging market gardens if we're telling them they need to come to community council to get a 6.5-foot fence. Oh, I'm out of time again.
Through the mayor to the councillors. So the larger issue that you're speaking to around legacy subdivisions, we are trying to improve the subdivision bylaw to encourage connectivity, to consider the broader goals of the Green Network Plan in how we design those communities. So I would say we are still learning. It's part of this plan to do that work, to improve how we're designing subdivisions. There aren't a lot of them left in our framework. There aren't a lot of remaining subdivisions, or I guess enabled subdivisions. So we can speak with you more about that. There's not a lot of subdivision to come. So we're dealing with a lot of legacy places. So that then becomes about how do we think about those areas? How do we service those areas? What do those areas become over time? So I think we want to have that conversation with you, and you know, we definitely know that we have study already underway on transportation in your area, like that I spoke about. So we highlighted that as a regional transportation issue that needs to get looked at before we move ahead with more development in the Bedford area. So I would say that, and also the Highway 102 as two critical regional pieces that need to get done as we're thinking about enabling more housing. So we'll speak with you more about this, and it's absolutely critical. And fencing, I'm going to turn over to Leah.
Thank you, through the mayor to the councillor. So, you know, certainly I take your point around, you know, if we're going to be enabling things, we need to sort of look at all the downstream impacts. That is sort of the next step for us as we go. We've released kind of the high-level policy, and now we'll need to be going through all the policies and go, okay, what are the various bylaws, land use bylaws, but anything else that needs to be changed to adjust. In terms of the fencing bylaw, though, my understanding is that the only fences that come to council are ones that are over 6 feet or 6.5, and that's a building code requirement because it's a safety thing. So it's not a planning thing. It's a building official having to say that this is a structurally sound fence, because if a large fence fell over, it would be problematic. A shorter fence can there is no permitting process as far as I'm aware.
Well, we'll tell the deer that, because
Yes, the deer
they don't
can
really
jump
care
higher
about
than 6 feet, I would guess.
the building code.
All right.
My question is that I, like some other councillors, have suburban, rural, and urban. And how are we going to be treated differently? Because I'm sure they all have their different needs. Are you going to come to each area separately? Because they're all technically in District 12, so we can't have one consultation. So I'm just wondering, I know you have a plan, but just wondering what it might be. Thank you.
Yeah, so back to the rural areas. So I heard what you said, that, you know, this is a regional plan. We're going to be focusing first on the suburbs, and that it will probably be next council that's going to focus on the rural areas, and that there'll be a high level of engagement in that. But I think, you know, as we move forward, we need to always keep that rural component in mind. So like even when we're presenting the maps, like we are presenting here in the presentation, you know, we have the urban center highlighted quite significantly. And even though we have maps in the report that show the rural service hubs and service centers, we don't see them on the regional map. And I know that we're doing this in phases, but I think our approach needs to really be an integrated one, and understanding how those rural service centers and hubs connect in to the suburban and connect in to the urban, and not in isolation. And so in the presentation of the regional plan review and the work that we're doing, I think there is value in making sure that we have those on the map. So it's not just an urban center and the rest is a blank slate. I remember dealing with something similar once in the North End, where we had the downtown was all in color, and anything outside of that was just gray, as if it didn't exist, right? And that's not the way that communities work. It's not the way that regions work. It's not the way that ecosystems work. So I would just you know, say that as we go forward in presenting this information and these graphics, that we really demonstrate the integrated approach that I know we talk about, but it's not always visibly apparent. And, you know, those images carry a lot more weight than sometimes words. And everyone's going to be reading the text and, you know, getting the subtext of it all. So, you know, I just think it's really important, and it helps us all keep it top of mind that we're a region, that we're an integrated region, that we have urban, suburban, and rural, and that we're going to figure out how we make it all work together, and that those places have significant historical value and functional value to our city as well.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One last question about a part of the integrated mobility plan, which would be like transportation and transit. And how likely is it that through the public participation process of this regional plan, would those comments from our residents be able to influence like the new transit priority plan? Because we're at the end of our moving forward together plan, so we need a new fresh plan to implement. So like, I'm just wondering what the integration is between your business unit and transit's business unit, because I can just see this is going to be a big topic when it comes to community planning, of course, because it's a big hurdle right now for many residents. So what's that connection piece between the business units, and how will our public participation be able to influence the new transit plan? Because I want to be able to, with confidence, tell my residents that their voice does matter, and it is worth it to come out and make the effort to you know, read through this, do the surveys, come out to any town halls that we have.
Consistently throughout this entire experience, the community of Tantallon on Peggy's Cove Road has been referred to as having experienced a wildfire. They in fact did not. The community of Upper Tantallon did experience wildfire. So I just wanted to make that note. If you can update that before going to community, we'd really appreciate it. I also want to note the importance of the sea change in housing diversity that we're seeing in this regional plan draft compared to what we saw in 2014. It's extremely important to communities to be able to develop and grow, but also for folks to stay and remain in their communities when we have diversity of housing.
I want to just say this, that first of all, thank you to the planning staff. It bothers me that there is a lack of understanding of the importance of planning. Like sometimes people think of planning as just the people that slow everything down and don't do things. And in fact, planning is so critical to everything that this city does. And, I think it's really important that people understand that there are reasons sometimes things don't happen. Environmental reasons, traffic reasons, Oh, the planners, they're doing another traffic study. Oh, the planners, they're looking at another environmental assessment. Are there occasions that we should be faster? Yeah, I fully believe there is. But the work of planners is really important. And these overarching plans are really important.